So Sonya has a master's degree in psychology and leadership coaching. She's been a longtime strengths coach. That's her passion. Does tons of community work and with nonprofits and organizations and congregations and schools and inner city youth programs and community organizing. And in fact, we featured a couple of her articles, and she's done some very practical resources for kids. So we've featured a couple of those on the VIA site over the years, and you can see those, and maybe we'll go ahead and point people to those, Ruth, in the Facebook page sometime in the next couple of days. But so that's just a short introduction to Sonya. And Sonya, I just want to welcome you again. Thanks for being here, and I want to just open the floor to you to share a little bit about what your perspective is and thoughts for our community here.
Now I'm humbled to like, what am I supposed to say now? Well, first of all, I am very grateful that you asked me to share some thoughts in my mind. There are just so many things that are on my heart, and I'm sure on the hearts of all the people on this call. I decided for me the best place, my hope is that this is an ongoing conversation, and so hopefully I can just share a few seeds that we'll continue to water together. But as a person who is passionate about strengths, as most of us on this call are, all of us are, and who cares deeply about coaching people around their strengths, helping other people discover their strengths, I can't help but look at all that we're experiencing right now from a strengths perspective. And part of the language that we use all the time when we're talking about strengths, one of the core ideas is that each of us has a unique constellation of strengths. We say that all the time. Every person has their own unique combination of strengths. And for me, that's part of what makes this work so powerful. It's not telling people, oh, you should be kind, you should be brave, you should be honest. I mean, of course, we should all be all of those things as often as we can, but it holds up for each of us our uniqueness, which strengths really shine out of us. And lets us know that we have some strengths that are really core to who we are, and that combination's different from anyone else in the world. And what's interesting to me about that, when you turn around and look at what racism means, racism is the antithesis of that idea. Racism actually robs people of the idea that they have a unique constellation of strengths, that they are individuals. At the very worst end of that spectrum, we start to think that certain races of people just don't even have strengths, right? They just are inferior. But another twist on that perspective is that people of a certain race only have particular strengths. Oh, they're all funny, or they're all good at sports, or they're all threatening. So no matter which version of that you look at, it's very much about not seeing people as those unique individuals that we talk about. I love the work of Brian Stevenson, who is an amazing attorney and author and activist who fights the inequities in our legal system, and particularly focusing on the inequities that Black people face in the legal system and with incarceration here in the United States. But one of the things that he says is so powerful to me is he talks about how the real tragedy of slavery in our country's history of slavery is not, of course, slavery is cruel and inhumane, but it's the narrative that's required to support slavery, that was required. Because most of us, we know as children, you're not born with these ideas. Most of us are uncomfortable treating people unfairly, that we see as equal to us, that people that we see as the same. So it took a tremendous cultural and political machine, a narrative had to be created in order for us to be able to accept as a nation that some people are okay with being forced to work. Some people are okay with having their children sold away from them. And that's evolved. You have to, it's really hard to look at people as the same as you and be okay with that. So it requires a lot of psychological work to see to other people in that way. And that has evolved in our society. And so even if we can say as individuals, well, I'm not that way, I don't think that way. Part of what's happened is that none of us are individually responsible. It's not our fault, but yet we're all born into this system that was created on that basic philosophy, and we still experience the ramifications of that way of thinking in our society. And we still experience some of the privilege that was created and handed down based on that original narrative. And that narrative has continued to evolve so that in the current times, a person like George Floyd is seen as a threat, someone who has to be handled with excessive force to the point of murder in order, and not necessarily as a person who has time to be given the benefit of the doubt, a person who has time to explain their story, a person who has this unique constellation of strengths. So I don't want to take up too much time with, there's so much to say, but I think for all of us, whether you're a person who wants to be an ally in creating racial justice, ending systemic racism, or whether you're a person of color who is trying to thrive in the face of systemic racism and help other people do the same. For me as a strengths coach, whenever we're asking that question, what should we do? It's always going to lead us in some degree back to our strengths, because our strengths are our powers, our strengths are our inner resources. And so, and we're going to need all of them. We're going to need forgiveness. We're going to need humility. We are going to need bravery. We are going to need kindness and love of learning. We're going to need every single one of our strengths to have these really tough conversations, and for each of us to find our role in the work that needs to be done. So I'll stop there. I think often people can do the same action or take the same behavior for different reasons. And often when I'm talking to people and coaching about strengths, we use the example of a teacher because it's something that everybody thinks they know how to do, because we've all had teachers, even if we're wrong about it. But people can be called to teach because it helps them express their creativity, or because it gives them an opportunity to use love of learning, or out of this sense of fairness and wanting to create, help all children have a equal opportunity. And so you can do the same action, which is protesting, for so many different reasons. And it can be, for some people, being out there in a protest is an expression of bravery, but for others, it might be out of empathy. There are just so many reasons. It could be kindness, and people are doing different things out there. Some people are right there in the face of a police officer, and someone else is making masks and handing out bottles of water. So people are showing up in different ways, I think, based on their strengths. Part of what I think is so powerful about learning about my own strengths and sharing that with other people is the sense of agency it gives you. What's strong in you, what you do, maybe or maybe not better than others, but in a way where you feel empowered and energized and resourceful and creative. All those things we feel when we're using our signature strengths. So I think it makes sense to me that that part of helping people feel like they can do something is to get them in touch with their strengths. The other thing I would just say is that a lot of times people think part of what I think has happened in our society is that one of the things we've all learned is that it's very bad to be a racist. Very, very bad. So when people do anything that is racist or that perpetuates racism, and you can do that, you can take those actions as an African American person with privilege, you can still carry out action that supports systemic racism. And so, but we all get so scared of that we immediately move into this defensive mode of I'm not racist. I couldn't possibly be racist. And in part, some of the things Ryan was talking about during the meditation. And so this is where I do think the work on mindfulness, again, is so important. Being able to just sit with those uncomfortable feelings we're all going to have as we confront the things, the areas where we all have some kind of privilege. And we're focusing on this privilege that's so huge in our society right now. But a lot of the resources that are out there, and I'll try to share on our page, that help us approach this mindfully so that we are not so afraid of being racist, knowing it's not your fault. We're all learning. We're at different places in our learning, and that, but what we can be is anti-racist. We can work against racism, and we can all just forget about arguing whether or not we're racist or not and just commit to being anti-racist. Well, not to sound like a broken record, but I think strengths are a huge part of that.
And what are your highest strengths, if you can answer that while you're answering that?
So love of learning, forgiveness, humor, creativity. I'm one of those people who has about 8 that have the similar score, but fairness is up there for me as well. But in particular, the ones that stick with me consistently are love of learning, humor, and forgiveness and creativity. Those always, they move around in the top, but they're always up there.
You were saying, I kind of interrupted. You were saying that those strengths can help you to re-energize yourself, so those 4 in particular?
Yeah, when you start learning specific activities, roles, taking on roles, I've learned to look for roles that allow me to use those strengths, because then I find the work restoring. Then I experience it as something I would pay to do or something I want to do anyway, as opposed to something that feels burdensome. And so I think we really have to keep our strengths top of mind in our work, and whatever, and not just paid work, but just in anything that you choose to do, whether it's a volunteer role, because that helps you show up with energy. Well, that's one of the big pieces, using your strengths to restore yourself. Great work out there about finding your role in social change, and I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of using your strengths to figure out your role. We aren't all protesters. Some of us are community builders. Some of us are more storytellers. So there's a lot of different roles, and there's some great work out there from a woman named, I think it's Deepa Iyer, about that. But yeah, you're right. I agree.
So we can start with our signature strengths and think about how might I use those to then take action right now. And it can be different for every person listening here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that model that Via often gives us, right? Awareness, exploration, action. A lot of times we think that we become aware of this and we need to immediately act, but I think just the same way that we do with strengths, giving yourself a little bit of time. It doesn't mean you can't support people who are doing work now, but if you don't know quite what you should do yet, it's the next step is exploring and listening and having that humility that you don't necessarily have to be out there teaching or leading a protest or telling other people what they should be doing right away, that there's an exploration phase that can lead you to action.